If you hear the name Texas, you'll probably think of a mixture of wealth, pride, and exaggeration. It's all about barbecue, American soccer stadiums that look like Olympic arenas, cities full of skyscrapers, and people who are even proud of their accents. It's no wonder that the phrase, "everything is bigger in Texas," has become almost a motto. And yes, looking at the numbers, you can understand why. The state has the second largest population in the United States, an economy that surpasses that of many entire countries. Metropolises like Houston, Dallas, and Austin that breathe innovation, culture, and technology. Everything seems to revolve around success. But is that the whole story? Today, as you know is customary around here, we're going to look at the other side of the mirror. The one that tourist brochures don't show and that rarely appears in TV series. Welcome to the dark side of Texas, a state where the contrasts are stark. The same place that boasts gleaming skyscrapers also leads the nation in the death penalty, faces overdose outbreaks, blackouts that paralyze entire towns, segregated schools, and pockets of poverty that defy all that image of endless prosperity. Hold on tight, because today Bello Mundo is going to take you to see something very different from the idea that many people have of this southern giant of the United States. Number 1. The postcard. To the outside world, Texas is almost a trademark, the land of country, of modern cowboys, of cities full of skyscrapers glowing in the sunset. Oil fields that seem to print money, Old West legends told as if they were part of everyday life, and, of course, NASA headquarters, where astronauts become celebrities. There's also Austin, the modern capital that has become a magnet for startups, independent bands, and cultural festivals. This is where South by Southwest takes place, one of the biggest music, technology, and innovation events on the planet, which attracts crowds and injects billions into the local economy. And as if all that wasn't enough, the state is one of the fastest growing in population in the United States. People from all over, whether from other American states or from Latin America, especially Mexico, move there in search of a better life, or at least a piece of that Texan dream. On the plate, it's exaggeration after exaggeration. Brisket that melts in your mouth, burgers the size of your head, and soft drinks with endless refills. Eating in Texas is almost an Olympic sport, and nobody cares much about calories. Texan pride is almost palpable. Those who were born there say with conviction that the state could manage very well on its own. And it makes sense, since Texas has one of the largest economies in the country and a culture so strong that it seems to run on its own. But that's where the contrast comes in, because behind this beautiful postcard and this reputation as a land of opportunity, there is another Texas, one that many people pretend not to see. A state marked by deep crises, housing, health, security, inequality. And the closer you look, the more you realize that in this place where everything is bigger, so are the problems. Number 2. The death penalty. Few people realize it, but Texas is not only one of the states that still retains the death penalty. It is the absolute champion in terms of the number of executions. Since capital punishment was re-established in the United States in the 70s, no other state has killed as many people as Texas. Literally. The phrase "the law is harsh," but the law is almost a Texan mantra. And for many people who live there, the idea of extreme punishment is seen as necessary, a kind of moral break, a way of setting an example. But this example in practice doesn't seem to have much effect, because even with this heavy record of executions, violence is still rampant in various regions of the state. Robberies, homicides, violent crimes, None of this seems to disappear just because the state has a fully functioning death row. What's more, there are a number of questions that leave anyone with a flea behind their ear. The Texas legal system has been accused of convicting people on flimsy evidence, forcing confessions, or leaving poor defendants without an adequate defense. Not to mention the cases in which the racial factor seems to weigh heavily in the outcome of some trials. Human rights organizations have been denouncing for years that justice in Texas is not only blind, but non-existent. And when you mix a rush to punish, controversial trials, and an unequal system, the risk of convicting an innocent person is not only possible, it's real. It's one of those cases where the state presents itself as a hard line, but the question remains: to what extent does this solve the problem? Or does it just mask deeper wounds that are difficult to heal? Number 3. School segregation and veiled racism. While we're on the subject of racial inequality, we can't ignore one of the most troublesome issues in modern Texas: school segregation. And no, we're not talking about something that was left behind in the days of whites-only license plates. We're talking about now. Even without the explicit laws of yesteryear, Texas schools are still marked by a separation that, in practice, is still very real. In several cities, there are schools almost entirely attended by white students and others, just next door, with an overwhelming majority of Black and Latino students. And you know what else changes along with the student profile? The quality of education. Schools where the majority of white children study usually have more funding, smaller classrooms, new materials, and more experienced teachers. On the other hand, those located in poorer neighborhoods, where Black and Latino communities live, face overcrowded classes, precarious structures, and a chronic lack of resources. This doesn't happen by chance. The way neighborhoods are organized, school zoning policies, and even the flight of wealthier families to private or charter schools all contribute to this divide. And the result is a system where students start in completely different positions, as if they were in a race with unequal starts. The data confirms what can be seen with the naked eye. Minority students have a harder time achieving good results, not because they lack talent, but because they are in a system that plays against them from an early age. This is reflected in school dropouts, access to higher education, and, later on, the job market. In other words, it's as if Texas still carries a modern version of the old segregation, more disguised, more institutional, but just as unfair. The problem is known, it's debated, but change is happening at a slow pace. And in the meantime, thousands of children grow up seeing that, depending on the color of their skin or the zip code they live in, the path to a good education can be much more difficult. Number 4. The obesity epidemic. Now moving on from a heavy topic to one that is just as heavy, literally. Texas, with its giant plates, endless barbecues, and fast foods on every corner, also leads an unenviable ranking, that of one of the states with the highest obesity rate in the United States. It is estimated that around a third of the adult population is obese, 1 in 3. And if we break it down by ethnicity, the picture becomes even more worrying. Black and Latino communities are the worst affected. The reason for this? It's not just the size of the burger or the excess of soft drinks. It's a structural problem. Many poor areas, especially on the urban outskirts, are veritable food deserts. There's no supermarket, market, or even a decent bakery nearby. What's left are convenience stores, cheap fast food chains, and gas stations selling snacks, soft drinks, and frozen food. And here comes the second blow. In public schools in the most vulnerable regions, school meals are often the only food of the day for thousands of children. But with few resources, what arrives on the plate is ultra-processed food, high in fat and low in nutrients. The long-term result? An entire generation growing up with chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, heart problems, and in a state where millions of people don't have adequate access to healthcare, this cycle repeats itself endlessly. Number 5. Extreme poverty and invisible cities. Imagine living in a place where there are practically no jobs, access to basic services is limited, and the poverty rate exceeds 60%. It's hard to believe that in a state that boasts of being one of the richest in the United States, there are communities that lack practically everything: jobs, sanitation, schools, security, and even reliable electricity. Most of these areas are close to the border with Mexico, areas known as colonias. And no, it has nothing to do with colonization. The name is used to describe these settlements that spring up improvisedly, almost always without the slightest structure. They are entire neighborhoods, not officially recognized as cities, where families build their houses with whatever they can find: wood, blocks, metal sheets. Many people there came from Mexico or other Latin American countries, buying small plots of land without running water, sewage, paving, or stable electricity. And we're not talking about a forgotten village in the middle of the desert. There are thousands of people living like this, on the margins, right under the nose of one of the most powerful states in the world. The scenery is harsh: dirt roads, makeshift street lights, children walking long distances to get to the nearest school, when there is one. Public health is practically non-existent, and hospitals are hours away. If someone needs medicine, the nearest pharmacy can be miles away. And if there's an emergency, good luck. Even in formally registered cities, there are still pockets of misery. People living in old trailers with no access to the electricity grid, relying on generators or wiring pools that look more like booby traps. On paper, Texas is a symbol of progress. But in person, there is another side, invisible to much of the country, where life is a daily struggle for survival and a far cry from the American dream. Number 6. Gangs, factions, and trafficking. Anyone who thinks that violent gangs are exclusive to movies is mistaken. Texas has to deal with the intense activity of criminal groups, both inside and outside of prisons. One of the best known is Barrio Azteca, linked to the border and Mexican cartels. Reports indicate that some of these factions have even received training from larger organizations, acting violently in drug trafficking and extorting residents and shopkeepers. These groups infiltrate everyday life. They control illegal services, charge protection fees, and even maintain influence over local authorities. Inside prisons, they continue to coordinate external actions. The border is a key point of entry for drugs into the United States. On one side, cartels; on the other, local gangs helping with distribution. Those who live in these regions, especially the poorest, are caught in the crossfire. There are reports of shootouts on highways, confrontations in supermarkets, and chases that end in tragedy. Narco culture blends into everyday life, and many young people, lacking opportunities, see gangs as a quick way to make money. It's not hard to find towns in the Texas countryside with cemeteries full of the graves of young people, many killed in confrontations or victims of overdoses, as we'll see below. Number 7. The overdose crisis. Over the last decade, the United States has faced an unprecedented epidemic of opioid overdoses. And Texas is not left out. Although some regions have less glaring numbers than, for example, parts of the American Northeast, the scenario is getting worse every year. The presence of fentanyl, an extremely powerful synthetic drug, has been increasingly detected. This type of substance appears mixed in pills sold illegally or even in more traditional drugs, surprising users who don't know what they're consuming. The result? An increase in overdose cases, often fatal. And here the social problem gets worse. Poor areas with few opportunities end up being the target of both drug trafficking and drug abuse. There is a lack of prevention, treatment, and resources for rehabilitation centers. The state of Texas, although it has public health programs, often has gaps in services for drug addicts. Reports from doctors and NGO volunteers show that people die inside parked cars, in cheap motel rooms, or even on the street, without any support from paramedics. And there are neighborhoods where children grow up surrounded by this climate, watching narcotics being sold freely on the street corner. To make matters worse, many Texans don't have health insurance, and those who do sometimes can't get plans that cover detox programs. Not to mention the difficulty of discussing this issue in the midst of political speeches that prefer to treat drug addiction as a pure police case or lack of morals. Meanwhile, the overdose crisis continues. Silent deaths that don't make the front page of entertainment newspapers, but leave families shattered. Number 8. Growth of extremist movements, armed groups, and white supremacists. In Texas, freedom is almost a religion. Carrying a gun, distrusting the federal government, and defending the Constitution with fervor are pillars of this Texan spirit. But this pride has ended up making room for something much darker: the growth of armed extremist groups and highly organized racist organizations. These are not just a few isolated radicals. There are militias with a strong ideology, tactical training, and real plans of action, often violent. The Oath Keepers, for example, call themselves patriots, but preach that the military and police should disobey government orders if they deem them tyrannical. Another group that has grown strong here are the 3%ers. In 2017, 3 Texan members were arrested for planning to blow up a building where immigrants lived. Patriot Front, one of the most active white supremacist groups in the United States, was also born in Texas. Founded by an 18-year-old, the group spreads hate messages, pastes racist posters, and has already been arrested preparing to attack an LGBTQ+ event. Even though they avoid appearing publicly in Texas, they remain active with secret training sessions and online propaganda. The most tragic case took place in 2019, when a young man of 21 left Allen, drove to El Paso, and killed 23 people in a Walmart. The target? Latinos. He left a racist manifesto saying he wanted to stop the Hispanic invasion of Texas. In addition, groups such as the Atomwaffen Division and the Aryan Circle have already been detected in Texan cities, trying to infiltrate members of the security forces or recruiting ex-military personnel, which has put FBI and Army authorities on alert. Number 9. Situation on the border with Mexico, immigration and human rights. Finally, we have to face the darker side of the migration crisis at the border. The border between Texas and Mexico is one of the most tense points in the United States. And behind the talk of national security, what exists there is a real humanitarian crisis, marked by overcrowding, harsh policies, and scenes that have shocked the world. Thousands of migrants, including children, arrive in search of refuge. But instead of shelter, they find crowded cells, scarce food, and a lack of basic care. In 2019, an official inspection revealed cells for 40 people over 150. Children sleeping on the floor, unbathed and sick. some of whom didn't even survive. The zero-tolerance policy has separated more than 2,000 families, and the Remain in Mexico program pushed thousands to the Mexican side, where they stayed for months in tents, without assistance and at risk of violence. Texas also launched Operation Lone Star, which arrested thousands of migrants for state crimes. In 2023, complaints pointed to orders such as denying water to children and pushing families back into the river. A pregnant woman lost her baby caught in barbed wire. In all, more than 800 people died trying to cross the border, victims of heat, drowning, and dangerous obstacles. Even veteran agents were shaken. When children cry when they are trapped, when a girl asks for water under 40 degrees and is ignored, the problem is no longer one of migration. It has become a moral one. With all this comes the question, so is Texas just a problem? No, of course not. The state still offers opportunities, has a huge economy, a vibrant culture, and many people living well. The idea here isn't to demonize Texas. It's to show that behind the sunset and the smiling cowboy, there's also a tough and contradictory side. Because Texas is great at everything, even in complexity. And now I want to know from you, which of these topics shocked you the most? Leave a comment, share this video, and of course, keep following Bello Mundo for more stories that almost nobody tells. Thanks for watching and see you next time.